Welcome back to Superhuman Customs. I'm Stephen Human, and today we got the big guy. I've been wanting a big Doomsday for like 30 years. That's when the Death of Superman came out. They came out with one from DC Universe Classics, I don't know, about 10 years ago. It was really expensive. When I saw that McFarlane was putting out this bad boy, I was super excited. He came with a Superman, and we're gonna do something with him in a couple of weeks. So we're just gonna leave him. But this is the guy we are concentrating on today. I just love this sculpt. Now you'll remember, I did this guy from a Devastator. So this has been my McFarlane Doomsday, but obviously I wanted a bigger one. This guy was more or less to scale, but a little bit small in my opinion. And so as soon as this guy hits the shelf, he'll be replacing this guy. But we're gonna be doing some of the same things we did on this guy. We're gonna add some of these shoulder spikes here, and we're gonna go through and do a wash. We're gonna make this guy look awesome. He's gonna be my quintessential Doomsday, so let's get going. First off, now, Doomsday's always been shown with like a tuft of hair, kind of scraggly. All of the toys that have ever made have given him a ponytail. Now, I don't necessarily dislike the ponytail. I just think it's too high on his head. So we are going to just simply cut it off. And while we have the resin out, because we're gonna resin all this other stuff on, we are going to put it further back on his head, if we can in fact do that. So that's the first thing. Remove the ponytail. Real quick, I'm gonna file down the area around here just to flatten out his hair, or not to flatten it out, but just to smooth it out a little bit. And then we'll start resining, because I want to do all of that at once. I don't want to have to resin more than once. It takes a little bit to dry, and I want the milliput to dry as well. Next thing we need to do is we're taking a leftover one of these from an Overwatch figure, like the Fire Blast. That's what we used on the other Doomsday. And we are just going to cut so that we can make some spikes. Because I want the spikes on his shoulders to also be plastic so that they bend like everything else, and then they're not gonna break if he falls, you know, because sometimes toys fall over. This guy's a big guy. And so I'm just going to kind of mold these things or cut them so that they are spiky. Thank you, Dashiell. So I'm just gonna cut them so that they are more of a spike. And just that simple. See, look at that. And they don't have to be too big. So I've got the milliput ready to go. I've got some resin here. And basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just pop it on in here on his shoulder where the milliput's gonna go. So, because I want that milliput to stay. And you have to remember that these arms do move up, so you gotta make sure that you don't get up in here with any of this stuff, because of the fact that it is going to, it'll then bump up, and you want to have free range of motion here. So I'm going to go like this, stick this in, put a little bit that can be molded, and go from there. So we'll take this, mold it in, and then we'll take our little spikes, and we will jab them in like so. And make this work. Then I'm going to pull them out, and I'm going to put a little bit more resin around the edges here so that these will stick inside very nicely and not come out, because we do not want these to come out. There we go. I'm also going to put a little bit of resin, ooh, it's already drying, on his hairpiece. It actually. And we're going to put it back like this. And I'm going to make it so that it's a little bit more like flowy. See how it's kind of going off like it's blowing in the wind? I think that's going to look much, much cooler. So I'm going to have to hold that for a few minutes. So why don't you guys go and entertain yourselves somewhere else? The hair is now finally in place and sticking. So we're going to move on to the spikes over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to try and kind of mold them around with the milliput and make it so that they're kind of spiky on their own, coming out at different angles. And then I'm just going to go through and I'm going to pock mark them so that it feels a little bit more, you know, natural. We want it to feel organic. So I'm going to do that here, add some little spikes here and there, just to make him pop a little bit. I'll do that on both sides. I have always loved Doomsday from his very first appearance. You know, I'm a Superman guy. The fact that he killed Superman, I just dug that. I love Bane too, because for me, Bane was one of those guys that, you know, just Batman couldn't beat. He beat Batman physically and mentally. And I hate when they kind of dumb these characters down, you know, or make them so that they're just, oh, he can beat Doomsday super fast. Oh. I like it more when they're true, you know, and you don't use them very often. You don't pull Doomsday out very often. You don't pull Bane out very often. Because the more you use them, the less of an impact they have. Same thing with the Joker. You want to just be able to have these guys very sparingly, once a decade maybe, and have a good story to go along with them. Now, a lot of people notice these arms are actually just Devastator arms. They've got some of the stuff there from, like, because he had more of a, like, shirt torn right here. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a couple of spikes here just to help cover those up so that it looks less like sort of, you know, like clothing that's been ripped and just more like spikes. So I'm just gonna add one in here and one on the other arm as well. There's no articulation in here to screw up, so it's a good spot to be able to do it. Now what I'm doing while this is all dry, or sorry, while it's all wet, is that these kind of have some lines on it, these ones up here. So I'm going through with a razor blade and I'm just adding in some lines here and there to make it so that they match a little bit more of what's already on Doomsday's shoulders. This is all nice and hard. Next stage is we're just gonna put a coat of fabric paint over the top of this. Now I've mixed some black and white just to give it a gray so it'll kind of match up in here. It's a little bit too gray. I might need to add a little bit of white. But anyway, the reason that I'm using fabric paint on these is because as the base over particularly these parts right here, the plastic parts, this paint will bend because it's a plastic. And so doing a coat over the top, it will allow these to get hit and bumped and it won't chip. I learned that with the other Doomsday. I'd used regular paint on it and he tipped over and it cracked and the paint all fell off, just that part. And so then I tried a little bit of fabric paint and boom, it fixed it. So that's what we're gonna do. Go through and get all this covered with some nice fabric paint so that it's a close enough color so that when we do the wash, they'll have the same sort of base color to them. Everything is dry. Let it dry for most of the day because this stuff always takes a long time. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go through with my wash and I'm gonna go over his whole body, just like we've been doing with a lot of the figures lately. And with this one, I am gonna go through with a little bit of toilet paper and clear off some of the excess. But my plan is to really darken him up. I want him to hit a darker shade so that I can start lightening him up a little bit. And this is a really great way to do it. And you can see how it kind of collects in these areas. And that's what we want. And I want it to really get into these spikes. This is a key moment to be able to go through and make this guy stand out because I'm going to lighten everything up after this. So I'm going to go through with a white up here and really make it so that this guy just looks absolutely awesome. And this is how we do it. Nice and simple. You guys will notice that a lot of the techniques, you know, I just use them again and again because they work. That's the joy of doing this, is that if it works on one figure, it's likely going to work on another, you know? So don't be afraid to give it a try. Now when going through here, you want to make sure that you're getting into all of these little cracks and crevices. And then yeah, you can go through and you can touch up and lighten it up a little bit with the toilet paper on the surface. But this is where all your details are going to come in, because when we go through and we do a lighter coat on this guy in these areas, that's what you're going to want to have highlighted, because then the dark will stand out and the light will come through even better. The number one complaint that everybody had about this guy was the green of the pants, because they're like, oh, it's not comic accurate, blah, blah. This guy is based off of the Doomsday from Reign of Doomsday, I believe it was called, from 2011, right before the New 52 came out. And it's a weird story, and there's like a cyborg Doomsday and an Eradicator Doomsday and a Superboy Doomsday. In any case, the green on his pants, this is accurate to that comic. It is pretty bright in that comic, but obviously there's a way to deaden it. And how we're gonna do that is with this wash, and then we're gonna dry brush over the top a darker green. So this color will still come out, it'll just give it some more nuance. And I'm gonna hit all of this stuff with the wash so that we're able to really make this guy look awesome. One of the coolest things about working on this guy is that he's got such firm feet, he just stands, which is wonderful. All right, so now it's dry brush time. So we're gonna hit these spikes first and lighten them up. I'm just gonna hit them with a white and spread it around so they start to stand out, because you can see everything's kind of the same color now, even though this was all lighter, it was all different. With the wash, it all kind of becomes the same. So I'm just gonna get into these areas nice and light. You can see it starts to pop a little bit more. Let's do some on the other side so you can get a little bit better feel for it. Because I'm right-handed, I always try to do everything from this side so that you guys can see. And sometimes I realize that I don't get in there quite as good. So I'm like, oh, they didn't get as good a view of that. So yeah, you can see how it's starting to light up, the light there. And that's what we want. So we're just gonna go over all of this in that way. And you'll wanna just kind of move it around and get it over the spots that you want to have that lightness. But you can already see how, the interior stuff is staying dark, and that is beautiful. Now you might ask yourself, well, what happens if I get too much paint on the paintbrush? This is what happens right here. You can see that it's just really white. It got in all the cracks. And so I might have to go over that again with some more wash just to tone that down, and it doesn't match the other areas. So that is why you want to get very little paint on the brush so that it just hits the edges and doesn't give you a whole big white clump like that. So use my mistakes as an example and do not do that. Make sure you've got just a very little bit of paint on the brush, because if you get too much, it's not going to move around the way that you want. It's going to take out all those details. One of the reasons I like doing this is because A, it's super fun, but it's also, for me, it's very relaxing. It's nice to be able to come in here and work on a little work of art for a character that you like and just do cool stuff, like, and fix things that you didn't like. Like I didn't like the fact you could see the tatters from our good friend Devastator, and being able to cover those up and then hit some of these areas here and just have it look like you want it to look. It's super enjoyable. So for those of you who've never done this before, don't be afraid to do it. Start with a character that you don't like, you don't care about, and find them on clearance. Obviously I paid full price for this guy because I was not going to wait, but you don't have to. Get something that's just something you don't necessarily care about, turn it into something cool. Like I had an idea yesterday for a figure that I was like, oh, I wouldn't get that, I don't care about him. And then I thought of something I could turn him into, and I was like, oh, but that would be super cool. So I'll wait for him to go on clearance, and I'll probably get him just to be able to do that idea. Because that's what this is all about, playing around with ideas. Man, he's looking cool. Oh, he's looking so great. Once you get to this point and things are starting to blend in, go ahead and go through and hit a couple of these spikes with a little bit more white and just make them stand out. Remember, it's all the contrast that you want in here. It's not the uniformity. It's that some things are darker and some things are lighter. And so go through and just hit some of these so that they stand out a little bit more. And that will really give you some beautiful textures. Speaking of contrast, going through with just a little bit of the wash in some of these cracks in here. Again, just to add some texture in between. Not much, just enough to make it so that things look a little different. That's all. Now I'm going to go through with some stone metal gray. Ooh, that was too much. Which is the Vallejo paint. And I got too much on there. See? That's why you got to watch out for that. I just want a dry brush on, and I got too much. So I might need to go over that again with a little bit of wash. You're able to deaden some of this stuff with a wash. See, that's going on much better. I'm just going to lighten them up just a little bit. Again, I want to hit these edges, not like what I did there where it became a full-on gray. So I will fix that in just a minute. But this, now it's working the way I want it to, where it's just hitting the ridges with a nice gray texture. This is a lighter gray, so again, stone metal gray. And it will help even this guy out. So just go through, dry brush that stuff on, and you'll start to get a little bit more texturing. And then if you need, like here, go over with a little bit more wash and darken it up a little bit. Because if you screw up like I did, that is exactly what you're gonna have to do. Since I've had to go through with a little bit more wash to cover up some of these areas that I got too gray, too light gray, I'm going through and I'm just adding a little bit of definition in some of these areas. And that will also help. So there's a line right here going across his chest that I'll fill in. Underneath here I'll get these things, just like with the movie figures, they go a long way to making it so that these little details stand out. And like how we went over it all the way on the beginning, just going through and hitting some of these areas now, once we're getting a little bit wrapped up with the skin, will also just beautify the character. And since this is a very textured character, it's really gonna help. That's why the movie characters look so good after going through a wash. It's because they need it to help the texture stand out. So go through, and then you'll feel much better about when you screw up and accidentally paint an entire area a color you don't want to paint. And let's get some darker green on here. Again, I'm just going to dry brush over the top and go over in just a few layers. But you can see already that it is a little bit darker shade. This is just another Vallejo paint. It came with what we got Sam for Christmas for his D&D figures. And it is just, let me see what it's called. It's called dark green. So nothing more complicated than that. This is literally a Vallejo paint called dark green. So check it out and use it on your Doomsday. Now I'm going to go through on the belt and I'm going to silver it up. It's got a little bit of a silverness to it, but really it's just a very dull gray. And again, I'm just going to dry brush because I've gone over this already with the wash. And so I want those textures to stay in there. I just want it now to be hinted with silver. And I'm going to go through here as well. Now I checked to see whether or not this part was silver in the original comic, and it actually isn't. It is green. I don't care. It looks like it's metal, and so I'm going to make it so that it matches the rest, because it's got the same texture as some of the stuff up here, and having it be green I just don't like. I think it should be silver. So again, this is my Doomsday, nobody else's, and so I'm going to make this silver. You can make it whatever you want. You can keep it green, you can texturize it, you can do, make it red for all I care. But just make it the way that you want to make it. And so mine is going to be silver. What I'm doing right now is I'm just going to hit some of these edges with a little bit more white. I want them to stand out again, right? It's all about the texturing. It's all about having certain things stand out against other colors. And so going through and just adding a line here and there will make each spike stand out just a little bit more. And that is what we want. You want people to be able to look and go, oh wow, they won't necessarily notice the textures. They'll just notice that it looks cool. You'll be the only one that notices, oh, I went through and I added a couple of spots here and there just to add some texturing, some lighting effects. But it will definitely show in how cool your figure looks. So don't be afraid to go through and just add a few little things like this. It'll take a little bit of time, but that's why you're doing this, right? Is to have some time to yourself. I have 6 children, and so, you know, it's nice to be able to have one night a week when I'm just in here working on a figure. I don't get a lot of time to do it, and this is kind of becomes some me therapy time. So feel free to take that time and use it wisely. I rush sometimes, as you guys know, getting texts. I rush sometimes, and I'm trying to get away from that. I'm trying to take more time to just make things really pop. And this is how you do it. It also helps when you absolutely love a character and you love the figure of that character, like I do with this Doomsday. One last thing, I'm going to give him steel-toed boots because he's got like a kind of a difference here between them, and I think it will just look better. I'm going to do just a light coating, not as much as I did up here, just to make it look different. I think that should be enough. All right, it doesn't get any cooler than this. Getting a character that you've loved for decades and being able to texturize them and make them look this cool. This is one of my favorites I've ever done. I love his size in comparison to Superman. I love that I was able to get all these textures. I've done so many more figures since I did that first one. And so I feel like this one, not only the sculpt, obviously, which I had nothing to do with, but just everything about it is superior, and it makes me incredibly happy. I love Doomsday. I cannot wait for him to be on the shelf with Superman. And I'm just grateful that they made this awesome guy with his roaring mouth and all that awesomeness. So yeah, I'm super happy. And I hope that you guys get excited like I do for doing stuff like this. If you're nervous, go on Amazon right now. You'll find half a dozen McFarlane figures for $8 and below, free shipping on Prime. Pick up a couple of them. Pick up a paint set from Vallejo. It's like 20 bucks, and they will last you forever because you're only using a little drop. Just start experimenting, have some fun, and this entire hobby of collecting figures takes on an entirely new life, and it is so much more enjoyable. I've obviously, you can see behind me, have been collecting for almost 25 years, and I'm more excited now than I have ever been to pick up new figures because I know every time I'm going to do something like this, and I'm going to make them mine, and I'm going to make them special. I hope you do the same. I'm Stephen Human with Superhuman Creative. Check out stephenhuman.com for all of my novels, because I am a novelist in my other life when I'm not painting figures. I write sci-fi thriller novels. Check them out. You can check them out on Amazon or at my website. You will enjoy the heck out of them. I'm Stephen Human, and I hope you guys have as much fun doing this as I do. I'll see you next week.